Right. Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wakakadash, Barakatham to the elders and apostles, Wa'akim, Wa'akwaf, and I say Shalom. And this is a sit-down lesson that I want to bring out of the prophecy updates as of November the 6th, 2025 on this Thursday afternoon. And you had a news article right here. As we've been seeing, tensions been mounting and increasing between NATO and versus Russia. It says NATO now out producing Russia in ammo. According to Rati, he mentioned it. The military bloc is launching a new plan and expanding existing ones, the Secretary General has said. Right, so tensions between Russia and NATO is going to continue to increase from arms race, and tensions only going to mount between both sides. It says the U.S. is seeking expand military presence in Syria, because I just did a sit-down lesson on that. It says Moscow. It says Moscow calls out NATO chief. Reich's tensions definitely heating up between NATO and Russia on a daily basis. That's why it says now, what's that, Matthews, the 24th chapter, wars and rumors of wars, and that's what we're seeing on a daily basis. As I add a side note to that, this is a news article from RT.com as of November 6, 2025, and it reads, it says Moscow calls out NATO chief. The foreign minister spokesperson has rejected Mark Rudy's claim that Russia and China are plotting to undermine global rules. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is applying double standards by claiming that Moscow is conspiring with China and other nations to undermine global rules. Russia Foreign Minister spokesperson Maria Sharapova has said in a post on her Telegram channel on Thursday. Sharapova inquired what global rules Rutte refers to calling on NATO to a full list of its websites. She further pointed out that the military bloc itself has a tracking record of breaking international law. The Russian diplomatic cited in 1999 NATO bombing of Yugoslavia and the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 fabricated pretexts as prime examples. Sharapova, if I pronounce her name right, expressed that no NATO member states have stopped cooperations with China despite Rutte's claim. The other day, a U.S.-China summit was held. I didn't hear where to criticize U.S. President Donald Trump for that. She pointed out these Edomites point fingers at each other. It says speaking at the NATO industrial, just like Elder Malcolm of GM in Chicago. Shalom to the Elder Malcolm, beloved Elder Malcolm. Every time Elder Malcolm always quoted, you have the Amalekites. They always pointing fingers at each other. And that is true. So I just wanted to quote that from Elder Malcolm. Shalom to the Elder beloved Malcolm. Hey, that is right. Elder Malcolm always bring that out. Hey, we seeing Edomites being divided against one another, pointing fingers at one another, accusing each other. What's that? St. Mark the 3rd chapter. If a kingdom be divided against another kingdom not stand. That's what we see in the divisions of the house of Edom is being divided. It says speaking at the NATO industrial forums in Bucharest, Romania, early on Thursday. Rutte asserted that Russia is not alone in its efforts to undermine global rules, claiming that it is working with China and North Korea. It says in Iran and others. It says according to NATO chief, those actions are increasing in their defense industrial collaborations to unprecedented levels, which he said indicates that they are preparing for long-term confrontation. It says last month, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that NATO has been artificially expanded its zones of responsible far beyond the Euro-Atlantic region, seeking to turn the whole of the Eurasia into a friendom, if I pronounce that right. It says the Western military bloc is pursuing a obvious goal of containing China, isolating Russia, and confrontating the PRK, North Korea, in a top Russian diplomatic reserve. Western officials has repeatedly accused China of helping Russia's military in the context of the Ukraine conflict, and a claim Beijing has consistently denied. Because you have been seeing economical alliance and military alliance between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and all the other nations that's allies with them as well too. Despite the fact they deny that fact, it says Germany arms giants reports booming sales and profits. Right, because that goes into that Joel the third chapter. Because we see these armies of nations doing more and more military spending and increasing nuclear arms race as well too. That definitely goes into that Joel the third chapter. It says Ukraine to lose key city within 1 week. Russian military commander says, right, because the tensions are heating up between Russia and Ukraine. U.S. Navy SEALs eyes for Maduro's mission. New York Times reports. It says another Wars and Rumors of Wars. This is from November 6th, and it reads, NATO chief urged West to prepare for a long-term confrontation with Russia. It says Moscow remained a threat to the bloc even after the Ukraine conflict ends, Mark Rutte has claimed. NATO member states, or it says NATO state members must boost military productions to be ready for a prolonged standoff with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, which are challenging the global rules. It says the bloc Secretary General Mark Rutte, if I pronounce his name right, has said, speaking to the Western defense contractors at the NATO Industry Forum in Bushgrisk on Thursday. Rutte told the bloc arms makers that there is more cash on the table and even more will flow amending NATO's rearmament push. Moscow has rejected claims that it harbors its aggression intentions towards the U.S.-led military bloc, saying such allegations are being used by publications. It says politications, I meant to say, in the U.S. and the EU to scare the populations, justify huge increase in military spending. Right, because you is going to see more military spending from NATO and the EU, while the ongoing tension between Russia. It says Russia also believes that NATO's deepening involvement in Ukraine was instrumental in escalating the conflicts in 2022. Rutte labeled the fighting between Moscow and Kyiv a threat to the bloc, and he claimed that the dangers posed by Russia will not end. It says when this war does, for the foreseeable future, Russia will remain the stabilized force in Europe and the world, and the Russia is not alone in its efforts to undermine its global rules. As you know, it is working with China, with North Korea, with Iran and others. They are increasing their defense industrial collaboration, that is true, to unprecedented levels, that they are preparing for a long-term confrontation. It says they are preparing for a long-term confrontation, the security general said. He noted that the plea by NATO members to hike military spending to 5% by GDP by 2035, but claimed that cash alone cannot provide security. We need the capability, we need the equipment for real firepower, and of course, the most advanced tech. This will require the bloc defense industry, increasing productions and shortening delivery times, really stress. Russian Foreign Minister spokesperson Maria Shekharova reacted to DeRozan's comments by asking him to clarify what global wars he was talking about and published their full list on NATO's website. Moscow and Beijing and the rest of the global majority has already declared that they committed to the international law, while NATO has repeatedly violated its law with the aggressive actions and legitimate in correlations and invasion of Iraq under the false pretext the bombing of Yugoslavia. So on Shakara wrote it on Telegram. This is the book of St. Mark, chapter 3 and verse 23. It says, St. Mark chapter 3, verse 24. And if a kingdom be divided, except the kingdom not stand. Right, we're seeing the kingdoms are being divided, and the nation of Edom is being divided, especially with these military nations being divided, pointing fingers at one another. Edomites are really being divided. St. Mark chapter 3, verse 25. And if a house be divided, except the house not stand. Right, so if a house be divided, except the house not stand. St. Mark 3, verse 26. And if Satan rises against himself, be divided, can stand, be have an end. Right, that's what we're seeing. And this is the book of Luke 21 and verse 25. It says, there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars upon the earth, disgrace of nations will perplexity earth roaring. Right, so that's what we're seeing, the disgrace of nations will perplexity seas earth roaring. And this is the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew 24 and verse 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Right, as we hear wars and rumors of wars. Russia versus NATO, Russia versus Ukraine. The Israel Defense Force going against the Hezbollah and Hamas. We seeing the Houthi rebels going against the Israel Defense Force, and we seeing what's going on down there in Latin America. You got the Venezuelan armies on standby versus the United States armies on standby. We see the tensions happening over there in China versus the Philippines over there, disputed territorial waters, not too far from the South China Sea. And we see what's going on down in the South China Sea, China versus Taiwan. We see what's going on over there in the Korean Peninsula. Tensions are heating up on a daily basis between North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and the United States. So these are signs of building up of wars and rumors of wars. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not trouble for all these things must first come to pass, but the end's not yet. Right, it's going to come to pass, but it's not going to end yet. Matthew 24, verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation, which goes into ethnos, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be, it says, there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. So with that, just wanted to bring out this prophecy updates as of November the 6th, 2025, on this Thursday afternoon. So with that, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, or Kadash, and the Heavenly Father. True name is Yahweh, and His only begotten Son, Bahashem, in the name of Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai. Those are the true names in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, the Lashon Kadash Latam. And I say Barakatham to the elders and apostles, Wa'akim Aqua. Until next time, I would say Shalom.